Here I finally have the Behringer 2600 in front of me. I originally ordered this in October, sort of the moment that it was announced, and I've only just got it yesterday. So that's October, November, December, January, February, March. About 5 months it's taken to arrive. Sort of a little bit my fault, because at the start of January, Thomann weren't sure how it was all going to work with importing stuff into the UK. And I asked them, they said, we're not sure. So I cancelled the order. So I had to reorder it again a few weeks later. But finally here. So let's see what we get in the box, shall we? So I don't really have any problems with Thomann. I do sometimes whinge about the fact that they forget to throw in a UK adapter, but here we've got a UK plug, so all is forgiven. Some people think I give Thomann a bit of a hard time, and I'm not really. I wouldn't keep on ordering stuff from them if I didn't think they were any good, would I? Okay, let's open this. Quick start guide, which is good. If you've seen it online, it's pretty good actually. Sort of goes through all the various aspects of the synth. Nice glossy brochure. It's actually really good. It explains each of the sections quite well. And it is quite nice to have something as a little reference manual that you can read without getting your laptop out or your iPad out or whatever. So top marks for that. One thing I've noticed straight away actually is there's no patch cables anywhere. You don't need them because it's semi-modular, but it would be nice to have a couple. Get it out the box, have a play. You want to start plugging stuff in and out. So I reckon up to about 75 centimeters, 50, 75 centimeters, so you can get from one side to the other. And here it is, and very sexy it is too. As with all these things, you know, I've not got a problem with any of the Behringer quality. All the knobs and sliders all feel nice. Metal case, metal reverse. We've got some air vents in the back. On the back, what have we got here? Got a knob for the LED brightness, 2 switches, a Portamento foot switch and an interval latch. Not sure what that is yet. Then we've got these switches here, and they'll be for the MIDI channel. Got MIDI in and MIDI through, no MIDI out. We've got the USB and we've got the power input. But notice on the back we don't have the main outputs, which would have been nice actually. But your main outputs are on the front. Would have been quite nice, I think, to have a duplicate set along the back there, just so that you don't need wires sticking out the front of it, but there you go. We've got a separate phones output with its own level, which is really good. You notice on the front we've got all these little rubber bungs, so these must be for calibration purposes. Maybe you could take those out if you need the calibrating. On other synths, like on my Mono Poly, for example, there was calibration switches on the back, and they're on the Poly D as well, but there's nothing like that on this. So if you do need to get into this, maybe a little bit more difficult, but only a case of assuming just, oh, let's have a look. Let's pop one out. Yeah, there's a screw in there. So let's pop that in before I lose it. So it's easy enough to access those calibration points if you need to in the future. But you can also calibrate in the app as well. There's all this sort of stuff. I'm not going to get into that because I don't want to touch anything in case it breaks something. Unless it's broken, don't touch it. Okay, let's plug it in with my wonderful UK plug. Okay, it's all plugged in. I've left it to warm up for about 10 minutes, and I've checked the firmware is up to date, still on firmware version 1.00 according to the Synth Tribe app. So the first thing you notice obviously is the fact that it's got the LEDs. We can turn those down. You can turn them all the way down so they're off, and you still get your LFOs flashing. I don't think there's a way to turn those off. If I turn it all the way up, it really does look like Christmas. It's Christmas tree colours, isn't it? Very nice. I wish I'd got it before Christmas now. Could have stuck it on the tree. Anyway, let's try and make some sounds with it. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking when I get a synth out doing one of these unboxings, trying to work out exactly how to get a sound out of it. So the first thing to do, turn the ADSR sustain level up. Then we've got the 3 oscillators across here. So they feed into the filter. So we'll put VCO1 up in the filter. It's in the audio range. I'm using this micro key Air, and it's not directly Bluetoothed to the 2600. It's Bluetooth to the laptop, and then the laptop is sending via USB the MIDI to the 2600. Well, that's the plan anyway. Let's see if it works. Okay, so the filter's up, VCF to the mixer, and we have sound. But we want to send that through the envelope, don't we? So we need to send the VCF into the amplifier. So if I turn that up, and then we need to turn the control up as well, so the amount of ADSR. So it appears we're getting something going through the clock, so why is that? No wonder it makes me nervous doing this. Here we go, keyboard repeat mode. When you first look at this, it is a bit strange and all a bit weird, so I'll just quickly go over what we've got here. We've got 3 oscillators on the top left, followed by the filter in the center. Filter's got a 5-input audio mixer plus 3 control routines, so 3 ways in which you can control the filter frequency. Then got an ADSR envelope and an AR envelope, and they can be used on the filter or the amplifier. Although the ADSR is normalized for the filter, and we can have the AR or the ADSR in the amplifiers. That brings us over to the amplifier section. The amplifier section's got the output to the VCF normalized. So basically what comes out of the VCF comes into the VCA. Plus it's got an extra audio in for the ring mod for some reason. But again, you can override all these and plug whatever you want into that. Then we've got control with the AR or the ADSR. And that VCA output then comes into this main sort of volume slider here. We've also got another input to the audio mixer, and that's normalized to the VCF. So I don't have to push anything on the keyboard. It just plays. Then we've got up here the reverb. It's just a basic emulation of a spring reverb. No other controls, just that. It's quite nice. And along the bottom, we've got more sort of control circuits. We've got an LFO. We've got a preamp that can be used for internal or external signals. Envelope follower, ring mod, noise generator, this voltage processor down here, plus a sample and hold circuit and this electric switch. And I'm going to go through all of that in a minute. But we'll start off up here looking at the oscillators. We've got the 3 oscillators, and each of those has got modulation inputs. Oscillator 1 doesn't have the pulse width input that oscillators 2 and oscillator 3 does, but other than that they've got the same inputs. So we've got normalized inputs, in other words what's pre-wired is shown in these little orange boxes. So oscillator 1, for example, got the keyboard, so as I play the keyboard, oscillator 1 will change pitch. But I can turn that modulation off, and now not only is it not responding to the keyboard, but it goes into a low frequency mode. And each of the oscillators do that. But we've got the sample and hold out as an input, ADSR as an input. So if we put the ADSR on, for example, we'll get a pitch change depending on where this is set, the ADSR generator. And if we turn the LFO up, and obviously you can have both. Or you could override any of these and bring something else in. So if you wanted to modulate oscillator 1 with oscillator 2, bring one of the outputs from oscillator 2. Here we've got triangle, saw, sine or a pulse. Let's bring it with the pulse. Let's modulate it using this input here. As I change the pulse width of VCO2, it's changing what's happening with the frequency modulation of oscillator 1. So all of these inputs basically override the text in the box. So oscillator 2, we can put pulse width on, pulse width modulation, and that comes in from the noise generator. Let's just put it on about 0. And we know we're listening to the pulse because on the VCF, which we'll come to in a minute, the normalized VCO2 input is the pulse. So we don't necessarily want that coming from noise. I don't know why anyone ever would, but let's bring it in from the LFO. So LFO triangle, we'll bring that into the pulse width modulation. So we're getting through 0 there when it's right at the edges. But on its own, without any modulation, it doesn't go through 0. So oscillators 2 and 3 are different to oscillator 1 in that they've got pulse width modulation, but they've also got a triangle out and a sine out. And the original 2600 didn't have that on oscillator 3. It had the same outputs as oscillator 1, so a nice little addition there. There are no central indentations, just like on the Odyssey, there's no central indentations on this for the tuning, so you've got to either use a tuner or have perfect pitch. That seems to be tracking okay. Oscillators 2 and 3 have got sync, so let's put sync on and let's modulate with the ADSR, listening to 2, and I'm just going to use this manual button just to show you that that works. And that reminds me of the monopoly I tested a few weeks back that has a really bitey sort of texture to it, whereas the Korg original had a little bit more of a smoother texture as the sort of harmonics interacted. Let's have a listen again. Let's take that off. No, it's more bitey just at the extreme, so I've got to whack this up here. So only when it's at those extremes I'm getting that sort of grittiness. Let's try it with oscillator 3 as well. So let's put sync on oscillator 3 and let's modulate that with the ADSR as well. Slightly different amounts, different tunings. Hear what we get. Putting it on a more musical setting, one you might actually use, it sounds fine. It might be the same with everything when you whack it up to those sort of frequencies, I don't know, but the fact that you can tune this oscillator all the way up to 10 kilohertz maybe is the reason for that. So we're up and running. So we've got the filter here and we've got a switch between two different models of filter. I think one was the original ladder filter and the other was ARP Zone. So let's try a bit of resonance in that. That's nice. That was the 4072 version. Go for the 4012. Not a lot of difference between them there, is there? But you generally don't get many differences until you take them to the extremes. Still not much difference. Let's whack that resonance up a bit higher. Get much more resonance on the original 4012. When I say much more, you know. Reminds me a little bit of a new Prophet 5 Rev 4, and there's very minor differences between the revision 1 of the filter that's used on Rev 1 and Rev 2 versions of the synth, and revision 3 of the filter, which is used on Rev 3 of the synth. There's people really like the Rev 1 and Rev 2, and to me there's not a massive, vast amount of difference. I've not fully experimented with it yet, but it's not like on the Odyssey we got that 12 dB filter and it's completely different to the others. I mean, there's quite a difference there, but that's not exactly musical, is it? Be a difference when making percussion sounds and things like that. Let's track that with the keyboard then. Let's take the VCOs out. So on full, we're tracking the keyboard. Let's try that on the second revision. They're really close, aren't they? Ooh, that's fat. Should we do a filter sweep, see if we can get a copyright claim? Just plugged in the frequency analyzer and I'm getting down to 40 there. Ah, it's really low, that. And I'm in the studio here and I've got my Neumann KH310s. They go down to 30, it says, in the specs, and I can hear this. I can't hear that. Well, that's beautiful, that, isn't it? Let's swap between them again. So yeah, not a huge amount of difference. Let's stick a sawtooth on and do a nice sweep. Nice. Try it with the other one, although I don't think there's much point, but let's put all three oscillators in, do a big fat one. sounds really nice, doesn't it? I've sort of lusted after one of these since I sold a set of speakers to some guy in Manchester, and he had an original in his apartment, so it was really nice. Huge, big thing. And, you know, at that point, prices had gone through the roof. So brilliant to actually get my hands on. I know it's not an original, but... And I don't know if it sounds exactly like an original or if it sounds anything like an original, to be honest, but it does sound nice. And that's what's important, isn't it? And with these things, it's about the interaction, the interface, how you play with it and how you create sounds with it. The sound's really important. Whether it sounds exactly like one, I don't know. If somebody wants to lend me an original ARP 2600, I'd be more than happy to stick them together. Or maybe, you know, be interesting to put this against the Korg, wouldn't it? And we get that familiar drop in volume when we turn the resonance up. The resonance creeps up, all the other frequencies go down. And that's the same on both modes. Still looking for obvious differences, and they're just sort of subtle differences, aren't they, between those two modes? Just playing with the envelope there, see what the release is like, and we've got a time factor here of 0.5, 1 and 2, so let's put it on 1 and on 2. So 0.5's a lot quicker, well obviously 4 times the speed if it's doing what it says. Just trying to make a little percussive kick or something. Should add some noise into that. Envelopes aren't really long though, are they? Listen to that. So that's using the AR envelope, and that's on its maximum release. And now that's the ADSR envelope. It's a little bit longer. So this isn't a synth you do really long pad type sounds on with huge releases. The longest you're gonna get is that, which is all right, but it's not really great for doing a really sort of nice sweep on the filter with high resonance. Something like Synrise on your Juno 2, that's sort of quite a famous sound, and it just sort of lingers for hours. You can hear it in the background there. Let's try that with the VCA using the AR envelope. Hold the sustain on with the AR envelope and see what happens with the decay time. That's more like it, that's the tone I was going for, but you can't do it in release. See, decay time is an awful lot longer than the release time. And just looking at the noise quickly, we've got, turn the filter all the way up, we've got so white, down to pink, down to brown, I suppose. Pity you can't actually modulate that, isn't it? I suppose you can through the filter, but... All acting as I'd expect. We've got VCO2 on a sine wave as a control as well, so Let's put VCO2 down into really low frequencies and turn the keyboard off. On each of the oscillators we've got this switch here, which is keyboard on or keyboard off, which switches it into the low frequency mode. But if we modulate it in an audio rate rather than low frequency rates, obviously we're going to get some FM style sounds through the filter. Quite formanty that, isn't it? Like that. Anyway, let's move on. We've got the ADSR and we've got the AR. Really can see, after playing with this for a bit, how my ARP Odyssey is based on this. You know, the circuitry from this has been thrown into there with the ADSR envelope with the re-triggering modes on the envelopes. You've only got 2 oscillators on the Odyssey, but you do have the low frequency mode and sync, and you've got the ring mod as well. And on here, we've got ring mod down there. So it's all quite familiar territory. The ARP Odyssey, obviously you don't have the patch punch, you have switches, so you have the option of a sawtooth or a square, but you don't have to patch it, you just switch it. So you can see how the Odyssey is a real sort of clear development from this, and why it's sort of much more simple to use but gets similar tones. Anyway, that's enough for that sort of nonsense. Let's move on over to this sort of top right hand panel here. Got the inputs to the VCA over here, got the VCF ring mod, and we've got the 2 envelopes as well, the AR and the ADSR. So let's just put a bit of ring mod on, shall we? And the ring mod there sounds different to the Odyssey because we're using VCO1 sawtooth and a VCO2 sine, whereas I think it does something different on the Odyssey using two pulses. So it's not actually ring mod, it's a sort of equivalent of that works mathematically with pulses. Who knows? Not me, but it just sounds a bit different. But of course, we could patch in the 2 pulses to bring them in down here. We can bring the ring mod in post filter over here, or we can bring it in with the oscillators in the mixer to the filter there. So it's all quite flexible, but let's take a look at this reverb now. There's the Blue Marvin, and is it the Grey Meanie, I think it's called. I've got a spring reverb inside the real spring, and this is just a digital recreation. So let's have a listen to that. Let's just put it on a sort of simple tone again, shall we? We've got these additional inputs in the mixer section so that you don't have to put everything through the reverb. I've got this drum machine playing on the iPad. And that's coming in post reverb. So if I play the tone on the synth, there's a lot of reverb on that. But I'm mixing it with a signal with no reverb. Okay, so down here on the left hand side, we start off with Portamento. And this moment button activates it without switching it on, so you can so like a performance tool really. Then we've got voice mode, mono or duo. So do we have to patch that in? Yeah. If we put it back into mono mode. Duo. Get the idea. And we've got an LFO here for vibrato, so and we've got a triangle and we've got a square out for that as well, that you can take to wherever you like. Then we've got the vibrato delay. Down here we've got the keyboard repeat modes, so that's off. If it's on keyboard, it will only repeat when you press a key. And if it's on auto, it'll do it all the time. We've also got the trig modes. We've got single, so I'm not re-triggering when I press another key. And we've got multi as well. And that is re-triggering, it just doesn't sound very obvious. I'll put a bit more of an envelope on that filter. Moving over here, we've got this envelope follower and a preamp. Preamp circuit can be used for external signals, obviously, but it also can be used to just multiply any signal that you've got on the board itself. The LFO there is modulating the frequency of oscillator 1. So if we put the LFO into the preamp, then bring that back in to the modulation input. We're getting a lot more modulation. Take it out. So we can do that with control voltages obviously, and we can do it with audio as well. Let's just bring, what should we bring in here? Let's bring the filter back into itself. So this is a little bit like the trick you have on some synths where you take the output from the filter and you bring it back into itself. So let's take the output from the filter, throw it into the input of the preamp, output of the preamp, back where the filter comes back in. And there we go, we're getting that really big, fat, juicy sound. Whoa! Just take that out. Big difference, so. a really nice little trick, isn't it? What else have we got? Here I've just got a little beat playing on the iPad. Bring the preamp out and bring it in via the filter so we can hear it. The output of the preamp is normalized to the input of the envelope follower, so we don't need to put a cable from here into here, but bring the envelope follower output and let's put that into the control of the VCF. I'm just bringing just a simple simple sawtooth. Maybe let's try and use the mult and have them both playing. So loads of fun to be had with that. Next to that we've got the ring mod and we played with that earlier, and then we've got the noise generator and I played with that a little bit earlier as well. And following on from them we've got the voltage processor, and this is a little bit more complex. At the top we've got a 4-way mult, and then we've got these inputs here that are normalized to -10 volts, the keyboard plus 10 volts and the envelope follower, and then we've got a sort of a mixer on the right hand side. We've got inputs 1, 3 and 5 it says, but essentially they're inputs that get mixed to these inverters, so we can do more complex things with the CVs. So let's just have a look at that quickly. There are some really simple things I can do just to show you what this sort of does. If we take oscillator 1 to modulate oscillator 3, that's a sawtooth. So it's a rising ramp. If we put it into the voltage processor, we invert it, so it should be a falling ramp. We're not getting anything because we've not turned it up. So there we go, we've got a falling ramp, but the modulation's not as much as it was coming straight from VCO1, and that's because we've got this one turned down, so we need to turn the voltage up from that one, which is added to this one, and we get more modulation. Which is exactly the inverse of doing this. So it's really worthwhile getting to understand this. Let's have a look at some more complex uses of it. Just put a signal coming direct from the VCF, so ignoring the VCA, so we're ignoring the envelopes. Okay, now I'll modulate that filter with VCO2. And that's normalized to a sine. But if we wanted to use a sawtooth, we just plug that into there. But if we wanted to blend between a sawtooth and a square, or just do some sort of more complex modulation, we can use the voltage processor. So let's bring the sawtooth as an input here. Bring the output back into the filter. But now let's modulate that one with the LFO. Let's use the triangle, bring that into this input here. So here's a little tip, trick or workaround, whatever you want to call it, to get the 2600 in sync with other things. Obviously, none of this Behringer stuff has MIDI sync capabilities for your stuff like your LFO. People seem to be quite amazed by it often, actually. But what I've got here, I've got a drum machine on my iPad, just bringing out a really simple beat. I'll just play that. So obviously that's basically like a pulse, isn't it? And I've got it coming through the envelope follower because the preamp goes into the envelope follower and that goes out to the envelope follower lag on the voltage processor. So if I just play something. I've now got a sine LFO. And obviously you can sync it up with different things. I'm just using this because it was handy, it was sitting next to me. So, little neat things you can do with that. It's a bit more complex, as I say, but it's doing what it should be doing. And actually, if you've used the Arturia one, this is a bit more complex than the Arturia one. The Arturia is quite a simple sort of, it mixes between two signals. This is a bit more complex to get your head around. Anyway, let's move over now to the sample and hold, and I'm hoping this is a little bit like the Odyssey as well. On the Odyssey you can use the noise or you can use one of the VCOs as the input. So let's see what we've got here. We've got the noise generator and we've got the input clock. So let's take the sample and hold out, put it in here. So that's doing exactly what you'd expect. It's sampling the noise at regular intervals to come up with random frequencies, or random voltages I should say. So let's try it with a VCO or an LFO to try and get some more regular sort of samples. So again, all acting like you'd expect. Let's stick some reverb on that. And finally, after the sample and hold, we've got this thing called the electric switch. And we've got an A and a B input and C is the output. And all it does is it switches between A and B using this clock here. And obviously you can put another clock in there as well. But let's just modulate VCO1 with VCO2 and VCO3. We'll put VCO2 into A and we'll put VCO3 into B. We'll put the output from that to the LFO input for the FM control of VCO1. So just showing how it works, not demonstrating a really musical use for it. So all in all, very impressed. It sounds really nice. That filter's really great on that low end. There's tons to explore here. It's different to the Arturia version if you're used to playing with that. It's slightly different to the original as well. So I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere, and if it was, please think about subscribing and ringing that bell. And don't forget to take a look at my Patreon page, where I've got over 6 hours worth of tutorials showing how to get the most out of your synth, section by section, VCOs, envelopes, filters and the rest. So, I'll see you soon.